With that, our next speaker is Dr. Brandon Fisher, who I think is a complete, amazing person. He, along with a good friend of mine, Dr. Larry Doherty, founded Radiating Hope and establishes a nonprofit organization to enhance global cancer care. Inspired by their passion for mountain climbing and the need for improved radiation oncology in low and middle-income countries, they initiated the Radiating Hope during their medical residency. Dr. Fisher is a board-certified radiation oncologist here in Ogden, and he is also a voluntary assistant clinical professor at University of California. He trained at Midwestern University, did internal medicine at Mercy Hospital in Pennsylvania, and did a residency at Drexel University in radiation oncology. I'm going to shortcut this a little bit, but Brandon is incredible. I look forward to hearing him speak, and I think Brandon is a good example of how an individual can make an immense change worldwide, which I think is pretty awesome. So, Brandon, is he here? Yeah. Oh, hey, how are you doing?
All right, well, it's an honor to be here today and talk to you all. I'll probably go under time, so since it's right before lunch, that's nice. I have 32 slides, I have 3 movies, and a big topic to take on. So I'm Brandon Fisher. I work at Ogden Regional Medical Center, and like he said, I did my undergraduate here at Weber State, and it's always nice to be back at Weber State. It's one of my favorite places. I loved going to school here, and then I left, went to medical school in Arizona, a residency in Philly, and then came right back home. So I've been here 13 years now, and the topic today, like you said, is Radiating Hope. It's a nonprofit we started during our residency, and we were undertaking a lot. But also in this topic, I'm going to talk about radiation oncology. I'm going to talk about the philanthropy of Radiating Hope, but I'm also going to talk about art, and I'm going to talk about climbing mountains, and anything I do in life, I like to combine all those things into one. I figure if I'm going to be spending time doing things, it's going to be all my passions, and those are all my passions, and we'll see how they all come together. And these are my disclosures, which I have none. No conflicts of interest, though my life sometimes is probably a conflict of interest to most. So I'm going to start this out by talking about serendipity. So sometimes I've had some of my staff, once they even wrote on my wall that I'm the voodoo doctor. I do think outside the lines sometimes, and sometimes radiation is kind of like voodoo. You don't see the radiation beams, you kind of just say, hey, we're radiating this spot, but it's all a bit of voodoo. Well, serendipity is a bit of voodoo as well. Serendipity is one of those things where it's chance, it's luck, it maybe shouldn't have happened, but it happens. And one thing I like about the definition of serendipity, so I'm sure we all have our definitions, but the initial guy who defined what serendipity is, one thing he said was a requisite was recognizing and appreciating the unexpected. So that's the important part, the unexpected. But also important to this is that serendipity is about happy accidents that lead to positive outcomes. So there's nothing negative about serendipity. Yeah, things might be hard, challenges might arise, chances might happen, but the outcome is going to be happy, a positive outcome. And just to kind of maybe make you believe in serendipity a little bit, because it's not something necessarily we have to believe in, but I have a couple examples. So I climbed, this is us just after summiting Mount Denali in Alaska. So we spent 2 weeks climbing Mount Denali, got to the top, took this picture, and in this picture are 2 Indian twins. So they're from India. They had 7 Guinness Book of World Records for climbing all the 7 summits, the South and North Poles, and different things like that. And we met them in base camp, talked to them a little bit. For 5 days, we were locked down in base camp, heavy storms. It was kind of miserable. No one was really happy, but these girls are just like trotting through the camp with smiles on their face. And we connected, became friends through just social media. Never thought we'd see them again. Off they were back to India doing their thing. Then, so it says I traveled 2,965 4 miles to meet him on Denali. And then one day, 7,574 miles away, I was in Kathmandu. And we were walking to a pizza shop there. We go to Kathmandu a lot. We work with a cancer center there. We've been advancing their cancer care in that center. And we have this pizza shop we go to that whenever we just kind of need a break from the Nepalese food, we go to this pizza shop, get some very American type pizza. And we were walking back from that, and lo and behold, crossed in the street these two girls from India who took their mom to Everest Base Camp and just happened to be walking on the same street as me. And we talked. We spent a few hours together, connected, and then a week later, they called me up, said, "We really liked your vibe. We want you to join us on this race that Bear Grylls invited us on in Fiji. It's 2 weeks long. It's going to be shown on Amazon Prime as a TV show called The World's Toughest Race, and we want you to be our pace mule, so to say, to get us through the race. You know all the obstacles. You can do the challenges. You just need to get us through it." So then next time we met was 6,000 miles away in Fiji on a 2-week race. And if you wanted to watch it, it's on Amazon Prime called The World's Toughest Race. But how does that happen? Serendipity. Another passion of mine is art. So I collect street art. Any place I go in the world, I find the street artists. I meet them. I support them through buying a piece. Man, I was in Thailand. And there was this piece of art that was all over Thailand. It was a Mickey Mouse skull type thing. But it was all over. I saw it in Bangkok. I saw it up north. I saw it out south. And I couldn't figure out who the artist was to get a piece from him. I knew it was the piece I wanted. I knew I wanted to support him. Just couldn't figure out who it was. He was very well hidden. And then one day I was walking down the street, trying to get to my hotel, and I took a wrong turn, ended up on this dead-end road, and this guy came out of his house and just said, "Hey, come in my house." I was like, "No way am I going in your house, a stranger. Like, you're probably wanting my money. You're going to steal my food. I had my luggage or my money. I got my luggage with me. Like, no, I just need, how do I get back to my hotel?" He said, "No, all heart, no money, come in my house." I go inside this guy's house, and lo and behold, was one of the nicest guys ever. On his wall was a piece that the artist had done, an art piece. He came and did it personally on his wall. I said, how did you get that?" He says, "I know the guy. I'll call him tomorrow. Why don't you come meet him?" And lo and behold, got a piece from the artist that way. And at the end of the day, I offered this guy some money, and he said, "No, I've never touched money. I never will touch money." He says, I live off of pure kindness to others. And he said, "But I would take some food from you." And so never touched money for years. He says he hadn't touched money, but he said he hasn't not eaten food. He's always had a meal on his table every night. And this is one of his walls in his house. And it just shows how many people have come to his house and how nice he has been to them. Other moment of serendipity, if you're not believing me yet, was I climbed Kilimanjaro many years ago, and there was this guy named Good Luck Charles. His name was Good Luck, and I collect heads-up pennies. It's just a thing I do. I've seen a heads-up penny whenever there's something in life where I'm like, okay, am I at the right place? Is this where I should be in life? And I find a heads-up penny. When I took my board exams, I left the board exam like, I sure hope I did good. Saw a heads-up penny on the ground, thought, oh, I passed it. So it's just like moments like that. But his name was Good Luck. He gave me a bowl. I got a bowl from Africa where I put my Good Luck pennies in. But from him, opened up the door for me setting a goal to climb the 7 summits, and he kind of instigated that part of my journey. So the last piece of serendipity I'm going to share with you before I get into it is this gentleman. His name's Luther Brady, and he was the inspiration behind us starting a nonprofit as residents and diving into this. We had said, hey, we want to, me and my friend Larry Doherty, co-resident, we're like, we want to do a medical mission in radiation oncology. And there was absolutely no radiation oncology medical missions. And people said, well, why don't you do family practice or do something else? And we're like, no, but we're radiation oncologists. We don't want to do anything else. And so this gentleman said, well, why don't you start a nonprofit? I'll help you get it off the ground. I'll help you with the funds to get the nonprofit status. And he basically said, just do it. And how important was that? Because I had a lot of colleagues. I went to a lot of conferences at that time, and they said, it's impossible. There should never be any medical missions in radiation oncology. It's too difficult. Don't do it. Don't waste your time. So it's those moments that I call my fish in the sky moments. So moments of serendipity are when you begin to see fish in the sky. Now I say fish in the sky because there's a quote that I love from Henry Thoreau. And this quote came about quite serendipitously too, because I was sitting in my friend's room one day. I was 16, and he had on his wall, kind of tagged, it said, "Time is a stream I go fishing in." And I thought that's a cool quote. And then later, I went to Sedona, Arizona. I was living in a Volkswagen bus, went down there for a couple of weeks, and read Walden Pond. And when I was reading Walden Pond, I came across the line that said, "Time is the stream I go fishing in." And for some reason, it just clicked so heavy because I'd seen it years ago on this kid's wall, and now I'm seeing it in this book. And it finally clicked like, oh, this is the guy that said it, Henry Thoreau. And then he went on, and he said, "Time is a stream I go fishing in. I drink from it. And as I drink, I see its sandy bottoms and detect how shallow it is. Its thin current slides away, but eternity remains. I would drink deeper, fish in the sky, whose bottoms are pebbly with stars." And basically what he's saying is he's looking into this pond. Henry Thoreau lived at Walden Pond for 2 years. He looked in this pond every day, and he said it had a depth to it. And that depth was measurable and often shallow. Anyone that's been there knows it's actually kind of deep at some points, but for the most part, it has a depth, though, that's measurable. But he said how important is the perspective to invert it, begin to see stars as our pebbly bottoms, and when we do that, our depth is basically forever. And then we begin to see fish in the sky. And that's one thing that Luther Brady inspired me to basically start seeing. So I have this poster in my office. It's a Life magazine cover, and it says "Fresh Hope on Cancer," and it cost 25 cents, printed in 1958. And it was one of the first linear accelerators in radiation oncology. A linear accelerator is the main machine we use to treat cancer. And prior to that, we used cobalt machines, we used iridium sources, cobalt sources, but we never had a machine that made its own radiation and could be directed at a patient until 1958. And it says "Fresh Hope on Cancer." And so I've always thought, okay, was the machine a fresh hope on cancer? And as Luther Brady said, hey, start a nonprofit, the first thing he wanted us to do is do some research and figure out, is cancer an issue in developing countries? Is it a problem? Do they need treatment? Like, is it even worth doing? Maybe they have other things to worry about than cancer. Maybe it's just so far down on their list. So we did some research. We found that 90% of developing countries don't have access to cancer care, and that they have a high mortality and basically take up 80% of the global cancer burden. So not only do they have cancer, but it pretty much wipes them out as far as not having any treatment for it. And so in our research, we worked with an organization that basically calculated all the radiation machines in the world, and then we were able to kind of spit out these numbers. These numbers have to do with machines per person. So in the United States, we like one radiation machine for every 100,000 people. And from this chart, if you meet that goal, you're green. And if I were to scroll up more, you'd see America's green, Australia's green. For some reason, Uruguay is green, but there's not other green places, really. Europe's mostly green, sure. In Utah, where you have one machine for every about 30,000 people. So we have a little bit too many machines here, but definitely we meet the goal. And then we looked at Africa, they had one machine for 4.8 million people on average. And half of those machines, when it says a machine's cobalt, that means it's a piece of junk. South America, one machine for 640,000, getting closer to the goal, but not anywhere near it. And a third of them are junk. Nepal, one machine for 6 million, and 40% of them are junky. And so in our little trip and getting to know what cancer is like in these developing countries, this is a little movie we had made about a patient that we followed in Tanzania, just to kind of get a sense of what they deal with. So it's about a 2.5-minute movie. And ultimately, it's about two brothers. So Siddiqui has a Burkitt's lymphoma, which, you know, Burkitt's lymphoma, easily treated, usually with some radiation, responds quite well. So ultimately, this gentleman passed away from his cancer, and Tanzania doesn't have a radiation center at that time when we made the show, almost 13 years ago. Since that time, we've fundraised nonstop for this place in Tanzania, and now they have a brand new cancer building with radiation therapy, and now they can actually treat this cancer. But for him, Siddiqui, wasn't so fortunate. So in kind of tracking down this, we had our publication of basically radiation oncology in Africa and just how little of machinery they have. And just kind of by the numbers, taking each country into account, the only one that's really well off is Egypt and South Africa. But the rest, when there's blue areas, that means they just don't even have machines. And every year we do a cancer conference in Africa, and we know that there's actually radiation oncologists in all of these countries, and not just one or two. There's often several radiation oncologists, and they are biting at the bit to treat patients with their trade, but just don't have the funding to get it done. And radiation oncology is expensive. We just got a brand new machine at Ogden Regional, and it was a $5 million project. So they're not easy to come by. But this basically gave birth to Radiating Hope. Our mission is to update and advance cancer care in developing countries. And one thing that made us decide to just take off with it is, let's see if this, there's a picture that says, they asked George Mallory, famous climber, why do you climb? His answer was, because it's there. And so why do cancer outreach? Because it's not there. And so in assessing all these countries, we realized they don't have care. But in the United States, we update our radiation machines every 10 years. And honestly, if you go to a cancer center in the United States that has an older than 10-year machine, you should probably think about going somewhere else. Because we want the latest and greatest. We are very competitive in our markets, and we don't use old machines, but those old machines are pretty much worthless in America. But in a developing country, they can last another 20, 30, 40, maybe even longer years. They don't need every bell and whistle to market it. They just need it to treat a patient. And so we basically, through the nonprofit status, will take these machines and we'll send them to the countries that we work with. And usually we get more machines than we can possibly ship because it gets expensive shipping them. But one of the radiation manufacturers even gives us just a finder fee. So we basically take any machine that comes our way. We'll have it assessed to see if it's good enough to go to a developing country, and then work with the vendors to get it in that country and serviced. This was our first project. It was in Senegal. Senegal, this was their radiation machine that they treated about 14 hours every day on, and it's just so junky. We had our physicist assess it. It has a cobalt source, so a radioactive source sits in the head of the machine, and then a gate slides, the radiation's on, gate slides, and it stops. So pretty dangerous machine too. When we assessed the machine, we noticed that one place was 18% underdosing while the other was overdosing, so somehow that source must have shifted in the head of the machine and wasn't even treating people right. They were asking why their patients with head and neck cancers and other cancers were recurring before they even finished their treatment, and yet that would have been one of the causes. The most common cancer here is cervical cancer, and to cure cervical cancer, you need chemo, external beam radiation, and internal radiation called brachytherapy, and they had no brachytherapy machine. So their most common cancer, they treated to a point, it palliated the patient for 6 months, they would recur, they get surgery as just a dump, and then die within months after that. And this is their waiting room, basically just showing it's almost all female. Cervical cancer is just so rampant out there. And so we donated them a brachytherapy machine. It was a used machine for the United States. We shipped it out there, and we just published kind of what that whole process was like. But it was our first project, and so many naysayers said it's not possible. And so we just kind of broke the mold and said, look, it's really actually, it was easy. It's when you just do something and all the pieces just come together. And it's been like that with all of our projects. They just come together. The Africans wanted it. They figured out how to get this in there. They needed the source. They worked with the International Atomic Energy Agency to figure out how to get it there. And once they had something, they're very resourceful. This is another project I wanted to share with you about Nepal. So Kathmandu Cancer Center, it's a place we've worked with for about 10 years. And same issue. Most common cancer, cervical cancer, had no brachytherapy unit. None of their patients were treated with curative intent for their cervical cancer. They did have 4 radiation doctors, all very well trained, 3 physicists, 4 to 5 therapists. That's more than we have at Ogden Regional, but yet they didn't have the right machines. We did this big fundraising event, eventually got them a machine, and I'll tell a little bit of the backstory about that fundraising event and how we got them their machine. And once they got the machine, after about a year and a half, they sent us a picture of this birthday cake that said 1,200 patient treated in just that short amount of time. I'll be a doctor in regional for years, and I'll never have treated 1,200 brachytherapy patients for cervical cancer. So one of the ways we raise money, so a machine like the Senegal, overall it was pretty cheap, maybe $40,000 to get it there, installed, commissioned, sourced, and then maintained for a certain period of time until they could generate enough revenue to run it themselves. But one way we do it is climbs. We do annual climbs. We do Kilimanjaro every year as a fundraising event. We do Everest Base Camp every other year and other climbs. And then we have this other project called the Prayer Flag Project. The Prayer Flag Project, I have a little video that goes into more detail about that, so I won't go into too much right now, but it's basically whenever we do something, I think on a global level, we have to remember that all of our patients suffer too. And so as a way, we just incorporate our patients into the whole process. Every patient that finishes treatment, we write their name on a flag. These flags are supposed to represent strength, hope, and well-being, and we send it off to Everest Base Camp in their honor. And this is just a short clip about the flag project.
I got involved in this trek-in because my dad actually passed away from lung cancer in 2015, and Larry Doherty was actually my dad's radiation oncologist. So when my dad passed and Larry invited me to go on this trek for Mount Everest Base Camp with Radiating Hope, I chose to take my dad's prayer flag with me. Cancer is a very devastating disease that has impacted so many people. Not everybody is able to survive it. For my dad's situation, he was given 6 more months of life, but that prayer flag was hope for my dad. He knew because he had completed that radiation therapy, had gotten that prayer flag, he had hope, he had some extra time. And he knew that it's almost like he knew his legacy was going to kind of go on after, and that he was going to be able to experience these adventures, the Iditarod, and now going to Mount Everest Base Camp. So it was like he could continue to live on after he was gone through these prayer flags. And that's what I felt like when I was hiking this trek. I felt like my dad was with me because I had the prayer flag in my backpack. And I felt like he was with me in that prayer flag. My dad was able to get 6 more months of life out of receiving radiation treatment, and that's something that everybody should have access to. So it's really sad going to all these different countries and realizing they don't have access to any kind of radiation whatsoever, and it should be something everybody has access to.
And so, yeah, I'll go into a little more detail of that flag project, but it's something we open up to everybody. Anybody in here who wanted to join us, take a flag or take some of our flags up to Everest Base Camp, you're more than welcome to join us. I've had about 30 patients join the trips and lots of different doctors. Youngest person's 13, oldest person was maybe 73 or so. So the other thing we do is this oncology symposium, which is another thing you're welcome to join. We have lecturers from the United States and the UK and Europe meet us in Africa, and we get the vendors to bring in all the oncologists that we can from the area or the region. They come to a certain place, and we just do trainings and lectures. This was our last one in South Africa, and we mainly went over management of any type of cancer that they wanted to learn about, and also some specific radiation oncology things that we call contouring and mapping. But our ultimate goal of Radiating Hope isn't just the machines. It's about bringing back basically hope to the people who might not have any of it. And often I feel we get so focused on research and things like that we kind of forget that most of the world, 85% of it's a developing country, and they don't have access to these treatments that we get quite easily. There was a publication that I loved because it's right up my alley. It was in the Lancet, and it solved the problem for radiation oncology globally. And it said if we did this, we would level the playing field for the entire world. Everybody would have the same access to care and the same chances for survival. Cancer survival in the United States for 5 years is 75% or better. In a developing country, it's 25% or worse. And so they had this solution to get everybody up to that 75% or higher mark. And what it came down to is dollar bills. $21 billion would solve the problem. So seems like a rather large number. But they said that $21 billion equates to 27 million life years saved over a period of time leading up to just 2035. And that the actual economic return from running a radiation machine was $16 to $360 billion. So it's a return that they'd get quite quickly. All the places we've donated machines, after a couple of years, they've raised enough money to buy more machines, a second machine, a third machine. And so often I think if we compare that to how much we put in global research, 370 billion, just so that the global elite can get cancer treatments, it kind of seems unfair. To get maybe another month of life with some research medication, we end up making lots of people lose millions of life years. I had a patient AI Google me the other day, and she said, "Oh, I didn't know you were so angry about this global health thing." I guess the AI says I'm angry about it, so sorry. Yeah. So basically, what Radiating Hope we hope to offer is people with just more time to live, maybe get rid of a cancer. And often I think how much we trade our time for our patients' time, and what is that worth to us? And sometimes we work such long hours, and we're trading our time and giving them time, and it just always makes me think, what are my fish in the sky moments, and what am I living for, so that this time I do give to patients, I'm not losing in my own life and the life of others. This gentleman retired several years ago, and he donated his entire practice to Radiating Hope. You often think, he had such a big goose egg of, he had a building, he had radiation machines worth millions, and just said, you know what, it's not for my kids, it's for the rest of the world, and he donated the whole thing. We mainly sent most of the stuff to Bolivia. So in all this, I basically try to find balance. Isn't that ultimately our time, we got to have some balance and things that just restore us on a day-to-day basis. For me, I can do art and kind of fall into that. I can do some radiation. It just feels like art, and I just kind of feel like I create balance just as the day goes, but it doesn't come without frustrations, for sure. And takes me back to another moment that I call a moment of serendipity, which will lead into my last little movie that I have. I met this gentleman. His name's Lakpa Sherpa. I was climbing Mount Rainier in Washington, and it was one of the worst days to be climbing. We kind of had this thing where we're going to get to the top of this mountain regardless of what's going on, but there's some tall tale signs that you should turn around on a mountain. Mount Rainier that day had heavy winds, creating little seracs all over the place. It rained, and then it snowed, and then it sleeted, and then it snowed some more. That's about the worst mountain condition you can get for avalanche and just danger. We had tried to cross a couple crevasses. One of my friends had fallen in one. We had to drag him out, and eventually decided, you know what, just turn around. And as we turned around, we saw this guy skipping and jumping in all this bad weather. He wore a garbage bag over his head, didn't even have a nice piece of gear, just a garbage bag to protect him. And he's like, "Oh, my name's Lakpa Sherpa. I have the world record for the fastest time up and down Everest." And we became friends with him after that trip. And he asked if we'd help him start a company where he guides on Mount Everest, and then as a thank you, he said, if you ever want to climb Mount Everest, I'll be your guide. And so he invited us to climb Mount Everest. And so this little clip, it's uploaded on YouTube, so all these clips are on YouTube, so you ever want to go back and watch them if they're that interesting. But my channel is my name, Brandon Fisher, and then my channel tag is Fits International, for Fish in the Sky, FITS International, and this is on there. But I thought, I'm going to do something different for this talk. I'm going to create a little movie. I'm a very visual thinker, which is why I ended up in radiation oncology. It's a visual field. And there's just so many images I wanted to share with you all, and I thought, I'm going to stick it in a video and make a little movie for them. So this is a little movie for you to kind of hone in this whole big topic we've been talking about. The first thing people ask you when they hear you've climbed Mount Everest is, did you make it to the top? And when I say no, the conversation usually just ends right there. I spent months living in a tent at 18,000 feet, 20,000 feet, training, acclimating, dreaming, all for this chance to take the final step into the sky, I made it to 28,600 feet, just 400 feet shy of the summit, and then I turned around. My guide, Lakpa Sherpa, who I met on Mount Rainier, later became a good friend. He holds the world record for the fastest time up Everest. He told me that if we pushed
Under
on that
11
day,
hours.
we would die. And up there, you don't doubt the mountain. You respect it. We had already passed frozen climbers, dead in the death zone, and their memorials down below, reminders of what Everest demands. I always wondered how I was going to die, and I decided not to find out that day. And we turned back, just feet shy of the highest point in the world. Unattainable for us, but just in view. The reward of climbing is huge. The problem is, if you don't come back. My personal guide was Sarki, a Buddhist Lama from his village. He used to say, "The summit is for the ego, and the journey is for the soul." And that line haunted me. It played on repeat over and over in my mind. Talking about Mount Everest is sometimes like talking about politics or religion. People have pretty strong views on one side or the other, so I often just don't bring it up. But here I am, bringing it up. The wilderness up there is not crowded. It's not covered in trash like the headlines say. In fact, it didn't even cost me any money. It was donated by Sherpas who wanted to give thanks for some things we had done for them. It's sacred, vast, untouched. The crowds, less than a Saturday at Costco. The mountain, the most beautiful snow-capped giants I've ever seen. And they change you. On this journey, I carried hundreds of Tibetan prayer flags. Each flag was dedicated to someone who had fought cancer. About 600 of them were my own patients, names I remembered, stories I shared.
As they flap in the wind, there are threads of the flags that break off.
Flags represent strength, hope, and well-being. And in the early morning, Sarki and I waited till just the right lunar cycle, just the right sunny day, just the right amount of wind to hang these flags in honor of these people. We hung over 1,000 flags. They tore across Mount Everest, frayed edges snapping like stories we almost forgot, names hanging on. And the journey didn't stop just there. 100 climbers joined us to Everest Base Camp. Our climb helped raise enough money to buy a cancer center in Nepal, a new machine. A machine they desperately needed, but never had.
Here, en route to the base camp of Mount Everest, nearly 100 trekkers are joining us. They have collectively fundraised, which will be donated to a cancer center in Kathmandu, specifically to bring brachytherapy, which is a form of radiation treatment, to that center. And that's truly a life-saving improvement.
This part of our journey, it felt like we climbed something far more meaningful than just the peak. Names honored, cancer center with a life-saving machine.
Rather than achieving something for yourself, it is like giving something to others. And it is much more fulfilling.
And then there was the lesson from Sarki. The friends I climbed with went back and summited Mount Everest the following years, but I didn't. For them, it was a matter of persistence, strength, that pulled them back. But for me, it would have been more of my ego. Eckhart Tolle said, "It's a sense of self that arises when the mind is unobserved, and a mental construct that identifies with thought and emotions. This sense of self can lead to feelings of separation from the present moment, which he says can lead to unhappiness." My climbing partner wrote a book about all of our climbs, and in it he comments about me. The thing he says is my persistence became a bit of an obsession. You name it, I wanted to climb it, rappel it, bag it. Not necessarily experience it, just release everything in life and forget about the world for some moments. But getting to the top
was the key to success. Then there was the shift. Mount Everest was the shift. How shall we measure success? It occurs in the privacy of the soul. The moment you decide to release the work before exposure to a single opinion. Success has nothing to do with variables outside of yourself. The ego was this constant chatter with past and future that prevented me from being in the moment, which Tolle says is essential for peace and fulfillment. I told myself, I'll return when I've lost my ego. But then I realized, if I say I've lost the ego, that's probably the ego talking. So I left those 400 feet untouched. A memento, a lesson. A space where the soul chose silence, like something sacred I didn't understand. A quiet offering from the soul that finally didn't need to prove anything. I would have climbed Everest again, and I would have done it with Sarki. He invited me back the next year and said he would guide me. But the next year, Sarki died on Everest. If I had climbed again, would he have died guiding me? And what is fate? I did this painting right after returning from Everest. It shows Everest as a bit of a bunny hill, with taller, harsher, more treacherous mountains just behind it. Everest wasn't the hardest mountain I've faced. There are bigger ones, the invisible ones, the ones I see cancer patients climb every day, the kind that don't come with the base camps or oxygen tanks, the kind that don't always end in a view, just endurance. Everest was a release, a breath, a place to lay down the weight for a while, but life is the real mountain. And this is my fish in the sky moment. And turning around 400 feet from the summit didn't mean I failed. It meant I finally understood. Sometimes we climb not to conquer, but to connect. To let go and become small in the vast.
All right, well, a little bit of a long movie, but it just had so many points that I wanted to bring out that I didn't know how to do otherwise. But ultimately, we all have this Everest that we all face in life. And when we look for those moments of serendipity, the things that kind of seem bad and hard and are really hard to confront, often they'll have this little pocket of serendipity in it that's made to create happiness and a positive outcome. And I think there's a positive outcome to everything we do. We work so hard. We face a lot of challenging patients or a lot of challenging cases. But in the end, each little piece, there's going to be a piece of serendipity that just kind of comes in, and it's all made for the better of us. And I have this quote that I wanted to read, and it's kind of how I see Mount Everest. It says, "My Everest is not your Everest. Your Everest is not mine. We all have an Everest, each of us. Sometimes the peak is literally Mount Everest, but most of the time it lies deep within us, figuratively occupying a mountainous inner space. It calls us to rise up, do what we formerly labeled as impossible, and to be who we deeply and desperately want to be. I know that I have found Mount Everest when my soul furiously pokes me repeatedly until I listen. Heeding this call to passionate adventure of any sort initiates a journey of intense, immense proportions that changes every molecule of my being." So, in kind of finishing up here, just a reminder, like, we're getting poked all the time, and we all have goals and dreams, and these little moments that might seem challenging, but listen to kind of what your gut and just follow your dreams. I think at the end we want to have a life that we're like, whoa, what just happened? And then the ultimate is that we're just happy as can be. I know it's not easy, but I definitely do all I can to find those moments and find those fish in the sky moments. And thanks for letting me speak today, and If you have any questions, you can reach out to me. I'm available. You could find me on Instagram. I'm B Fisher. You can send me messages if you've always thought about starting a nonprofit. Reach out to me. I can walk you through it. If you want to join a climb, message me that way too. So, well, thanks.
Are there any questions for Brandon right now? We have a little bit of time. That was really great. Thank you, Brandon. I really appreciate it. Okay. All righty. That was fantastic. So a couple of announcements. Instead of going through the curtain, for lunch we'll have you exit and then re-enter through that side. The OSMS partner, Weber State University President Brad Mortensen will give a welcome for our opening conference day. And then Dean Simonian of the Dumpke College of Health Professions and Dean Easter Pilcher of the Weber State College of Science will update us on our program. And then at 12:30 we'll be starting with Governor Levitt. So look forward to that. Thank you.